Turn on, tune in, and drop out, you've probably heard, was a countercultural phrase made popular by Timothy Leary in the 1960s. As you know, Leary was a sort of cult icon of the hippies in the 60s and a huge proponent of using LSD. He was a model of open-mindedness and experimentation. He thought if scientifically produced drugs, particularly LSD, could lead to heightened levels of awareness, then why not give it a try? And he's best known for that period in the 60s, but he made a return in the 1980s. 20 years later, he embraced another controversial tool for personal liberation, the computer. In the 1980s, Timothy Leary was involved in a movement called cyberdelic. These cyberpunks ecstatically embraced technology. They believed that high technology could help human beings overcome their limits. It could liberate us from government repression and even empower us to transcend space, time, and the limits of our bodies. He thought the personal computer, or the PC, was the new LSD, and he rebranded his famous instructions to be turn on, boot up, and jack in. Timothy Leary was a bit of a dreamer, but he was not completely off the wall when he recognized the potential for technology to be a liberating influence. The three most immediate examples that came to my mind were how in the past few years we have all become more aware of the phenomenon of police brutality here in America. That awakening is largely due to the ability to document such events through mobile devices. Also, technology provides needed information for LGBT people and other people who are marginalized in ways that don't resonate with their families of origin. Computers are a saving grace for young LGBT people in the world. Finally, I also realized what a liberating factor birth control was for women, clearly a fruit of pretty advanced technology. Whether it's digital technology or much older forms, these innovations have made communication a lot more affordable. From ink pens to the printing press, from radios to mobile devices, technology has had a democratizing effect on information and the control of it. So as we talk about liberation this month in worship, it seemed important to unpack a little bit of the promise and the danger of technology in our world. It offers both some opportunities and some serious pitfalls, both personally and politically. Of course, it's not always clear what we mean when we say technology. Today, when people use the word, they often mean digital technology. They mean computers and mobile devices and things for communication and entertainment. But as we know, it's a lot more than that. It's the cars we drive and the electricity in our homes. A lot of us have technology embedded in our bodies or depend on medications. It's the refrigeration for our food and the artificial light that we depend on. It's even the clothes we use and the utensils we use to eat our meals. If you want to get really specific, technology began with a prehistoric conversion of natural resources into simple tools. Now, the proliferation of digital technology in our lives presents some challenges, and I'll talk about those specifically in a minute. But it's important to realize that technology is one much bigger and broader category. It's really a fundamental human experience. For centuries, and I'm willing to bet for millennia, we've grappled with the way new technology impacts our culture. In writing this, I remembered the couple of episodes of Downton Abbey a few years ago. Lady and Lord Grantham were aghast at the intrusiveness of the telephone and the radio into their lives. They thought it was demeaning and unnatural to hear the king's voice transmitted over a radio for mass consumption. And I imagine before the telephone and the radio, people were just as anxious about electricity. They thought it was dangerous and unnatural. It probably was dangerous in those days. The point is, technology is a huge category of human experience, and innovation has always challenged the normal way of doing things. So it's helpful to separate out what we mean when we're talking about digital technology. Because some folks are inclined to make sweeping generalizations about the great benefits or the great curse. You heard a little bit about Timothy Leary and his cyberdelic utopia. But Wendell Berry, who's the author of this morning's reading, comes from the other extreme example. He's a prolific writer and is probably quoted in our hymnal as much as any other person. I loved his work. But just this past year, I read a couple of his essays and realized how extreme he was. He's not just a nature lover, but he hates technology. Writing about machines, he writes, "Someday they will be gone, and that will be a glad and holy day. I mean the dire machines that run by burning the world's body and its breath. When I see an airplane fuming through the once pure sky, or a vehicle of the outer space with its little inner space imitating a star at night, I say, 'Get out of there,' as I would speak to a fox or a thief in the henhouse." He continues, "I don't believe that life or knowledge can be given by machines. The machine economy has set fire to the household of the human soul, and all creatures are burning within it." It's a pretty extreme point of view for someone I'm certain has enjoyed some of the benefits of technology. At the end of the day, there's no black and white answer. It's neither inherently good nor inherently bad. It is, however, a huge part of our human experience. So the question is, how can we leverage it to improve lives for all people? Most often these days, people are talking and worrying about digital technology. Nicholas gave us a great example of that. And there's a lot of worry about other generations and what they're doing and how they're using it. I realize, though, that rather than worrying about the digitally obsessed youth or our grandparents getting left behind the digital age, we would do well to focus on our own lives. We each have a responsibility to monitor the way technology enhances or diminishes our own relationships. If you're having a conversation with someone who's distracted by a device, it's okay to ask them to turn it off. Being direct about what you expect in your relationships is always better than resenting someone for their behavior. On the other hand, if you want someone to communicate with you in a way that's new for them, help them patiently. And try explaining that your desire for them to learn a new technology is because you care about them and miss them. No matter how good our technology is or our communication skills are, we cannot read each other's minds. So be clear about what you expect from other people. The more challenging piece may be finding clarity for ourselves. The impacts of technology aren't always obvious or immediate to us. When I was a volunteer with the Peace Corps, the issue at hand was always water, and we explored all sorts of different ways of bringing water to villages. And a lot of fancy international aid organizations are inclined to bring in highly mechanized water pumps that either run on electricity or solar panel. And it's important to bring water to these villages. But a lot of the times, these agencies also forget that gathering water has been women's work around the world for a very long time. And the water well is one place where women can gather and support each other. Bringing in new technology to the water source can damage one of the few opportunities that they have to congregate. I've even heard of water wells being powered by bicycle pedals in countries where it would be completely unheard of for a woman to use a bicycle. I tell you about water just to say that technology doesn't always have the impact that we expected. So take a look at the ways you're using it. Is it bringing you into community with others? Is it bringing fulfillment and meaning into your life? Is it a source of inspiration? If not, try unplugging. I think we tend to do what is comfortable, not necessarily what's best for us. It takes a lot of effort to make a rational decision about these things. And that comfort may mean creating a false sense of community through digital friends. It may also mean avoiding learning new technology because it's intimidating. But we owe it to ourselves and the people we care about to pay attention and to be proactive. How you use technology or abstain from it is your choice. Just make sure you are making the choice and it's not being made for you. And there's more involved, of course, than personal liberation. There's also political and economic liberation involved. We can tell technology is never equally distributed among people. Until it becomes ubiquitous and cheap, the wealthy elite have much greater access to technology. Their enjoyment, and I should probably be honest and say our enjoyment, is twofold. The wealthy enjoy the comfort and convenient and health benefits that technology provides, and we also benefit financially through the workings of capitalism. Henry David Thoreau was the first I know to point this out so vividly. He was around during the Industrial Revolution, and he noticed that factories were churning out all of these lower-priced luxury goods. It was the first time in history that people could consume things not out of necessity, but just out of fashion and out of fun. It was the birth of consumerism. And he recognized this new technology that people thought was going to save the world was really just a tool for exploiting workers. They couldn't afford any of the stuff that they were making. These huge cloth mills in New England weren't running for the benefit of clothing humankind. They existed to make money for the owners. It wasn't just a tool for making clothes, but for squeezing out even more profit. As I was poking around this week and curious about technology and economics, I came up with another example, who would be Henry Ford. I'm going out on a limb here. We all know that Ford was an innovator in the production of cars, and he made that production more efficient. It was interesting to find out, though, how terrible of a job production work was in those days. The turnover rate on those assembly lines was about 400% annually. So to deal with that, Ford dramatically increased the wages of his employees. And lo and behold, they stuck around and became better workers, and as an added bonus, they could participate in the economy that they were helping to build. In a lot of ways, that cycle paved the way for rampant consumerism, which has its challenges. But I will say that paying workers a fair wage, enough to at least participate in the economy that they're building, is only fair. In fact, it's the only responsible way that we can see technology improving lives, not just for the few, but for all of us. To ensure that technology is a means for human development, we have to pay attention to the wages of people using technology in our economy. Otherwise, it's using us instead of us using it. My final suggestion about technology is try to be a user of it rather than a consumer. This is probably a message for our younger folks. It's a tool for our use. We're not beholden to it. Just like other material goods, after you have enough to be able to thrive, the rest gets in the way. Keeping up with the Joneses' computer or their latest mobile device is just as insidious as keeping up with their car or their other luxury items. That bottomless well of desire for more is just as problematic with computers. In some ways, technology promises environmental help, and that's true, but it also has some pretty big pitfalls that we never talk about. Those computers that are outdated, those phones that are outdated have to go somewhere, and they are chock full of nasty, nasty stuff. After time, that stuff is going to leak out. The other impact that we don't talk about even less, is how much energy it takes to power supercomputers. These are the massive computers that are running Google and Facebook and Netflix and the other internet giants that we just consume like there's no end. But we're talking about huge amounts of electricity. The largest supercomputer in the world in 2015 drew as much power as the city of Tupelo, Mississippi, with 36,000 residents. That's one computer in a network of supercomputers. We're talking about huge amounts of power and carbon dioxide. So just as we need to make intentional choices about how technology affects our relationships, we have to make choices about how much is enough. And that answer is probably different for all of us depending on what we're doing in our lives. But until we know how much is enough, we'll never be satisfied on the quest for more. We don't talk much about the impacts of technology on humanity, especially in church. It's worth our thought, though, and maybe some conversations with our family. It's not all good, it's not all bad, but we have to decide for ourselves how much to bring into our lives. And we owe it to the working classes here and around the world to make sure technology is actually improving lives, not destroying them. Amen.